Hi everyone, it's Pastor Mark for our Monday night Bible study, and we are in the book of Judges, and we are already in chapter 13. So we've been moving along quite well, and I want to just give a little review of some of the judges and some of the nature of the judges that we've talked about so far, and looking at kind of their unexpected leaders that they had. That God chose and rose up to deliver the people of Israel from the people of the land. So Ehud was left-handed. Shamgar is likely a foreigner. Deborah, who is a woman, and Barak is unwilling to lead without the support of her. And Jael is the wife of an Israeli traitor. Gideon is fearful and unwilling to lead. Abimelech is the son of a concubine and an usurper. And Jephthah is the illegitimate son of a prostitute, an outcast, and more. So regardless really of their faults, these unlikely deliverers that we've already talked about in the book of Judges lead Israelite armies into battle against their foreign leaders of the land and deliver Israelites from their oppressors. So one of the things that we can talk about in terms of that, and going back deep into the Old Testament history, unlikely people chosen to be a part of God's plan of salvation and deliverance for the people of Israel. So kind of a fascinating kind of a list there. Now we go into chapter 13. So 13, 14, 15, and 16 are all the story of Samson. So I've been kind of waiting for this one. And why not? You know, when I was younger, I got my hair, it's not very long right now, but I had a story in a sermon once about my hair being very long. And my dad, it's probably in high school, and my dad wasn't too happy about this. And he said something to me about getting a haircut, and being the teenager that I was, I kind of quipped to him, well, I'm in good company. I've got Samson, and I've got Jesus with the long hair. I don't know if that really worked out too well for me, because I bet you I was down at Barber Glenn's by Saturday getting my hair cut. But hey, it was worth a stab at it. Those wily teenagers, right? So, in chapter 13, here, hi Doug, good to see you. Doug's from Brainerd. They've been getting kind of belted with snow a little bit too, and, it's kind of been all over the place from what I can see, but we definitely have had our share in western Minnesota, especially with the wind shutting roads down, so glad to see you, Doug. See Jason. Kaiser's on here too. Good to see you, Jason. So, if we're following along today, we're in chapter 13. Birth of Samson we're going to start with, and we'll see how many chapters we can get through with the story of Samson. Samson is going to be a really interesting character study as we go through it. And when we start here in 13, one of the things that is fascinating is that I think that the story of Samson starts with great hope for who Samson has the potential to be. And around the story of Samson is a miraculous birth, all kinds of other things that seem to go, wow, is this Samson going to be a little different than some of the other leaders in maybe having a lasting effect upon the people of Israel? Is this going to be a kind of a game changer? It seems like the other judges, they kind of came and went. They seem to have a job to do from Yahweh to free the people and deliver the people once the people cry out. But once that leader died, they lapse back again into their old ways, and that cycle keeps on coming again and again. But when you kind of get this build-up of this story of Samson, you're like, what's going on here? Is this going to be a different thing? So we'll kind of talk about that as we go on with the story. You're going to see a very complex, complicated figure in Samson. One of the people that I was reading this week talking about Samson says that out of all the judges, He's definitely the most complicated. And as we read through the story, you'll kind of see why, and I'll try to point out a little bit of that complication. One of the things that I can just say from the beginning is that it seems like a lot of things that Samson does are for Samson, and how that kind of shakes out is an interesting thing itself. I see Mark and Cindy Starner maybe are on tonight, so good to see you guys too. So with no further ado, I read from the English Standard Version once again. If you're just interested in listening, hey, that's great. You can maybe do stuff around the house or whatever you're going to do. Or once again, if you want to throw in a comment or an observation about the text, feel free to do that. You can do that in the comment section, and people hopefully can see that. So whatever you want to do with that part. But we're studying the scripture and reading through Judges 13, the birth of Samson. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So that, once again, that formula that the people, after the death of a leader, go back and lapse into their ways. And so the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. So they're back into the control of the Philistines, and for quite some time this time. So there was a certain man of Zorah of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Monah, and his wife was barren, and they had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful, drink no wine or strong drink, eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. So there's a promise here, even as she is barren, there's going to be a promise of her conceiving. There's a vow that this the one that's going to be conceived will be of a Nazarite vow, very much given or supposedly given to God in all ways, in even looks and in diet, and in many things. And the promise is that this person that's going to be raised up is going to deliver Israel from the hand of these Philistines, who have had control for quite a while. Then the woman came and told her husband, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God. Very awesome. That's kind of an interesting little ending there of that verse. Very awesome. I'd like to see what it kind of says in the Hebrew, but that probably is a pretty good translation. And I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. But he said to me, Behold, you should conceive and bear a son. And so drink no wine or strong drink, eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb and from to the day of his death. And then Manoah prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again to us and teach us what we are to do with the child who will be born. And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she sat in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, Behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me. And Manoah rose and went after his wife and came to the man and said to him, Are you the man who spoke to this woman? He said, I am. And Manoah said, Now, when your word came true, what is to be the child's manner of life? What is his mission? So that's kind of interesting. So the father is taking this message from his wife about what the role, at least in a broad sense, is going to be for this son to be born. And now it seems like he wants a little more detail about what's going to go on with that. And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, If of all that I have said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat of anything that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, or eat any unclean thing. All that I commanded her, let her observe. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "Please let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you." And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "If you detain me, I will not eat of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord." For Manoah did not know that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name, so that when your words come true, we may honor you?" So that's a little detail there, definitely in that culture. Name is really important. And so he wanted to secure his name. And so that would be a way that they could honor him by doing that. And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" Now Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground, as they were kind of observing this then. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife, and Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. So there's a recognition at that point when that was going on that, oh, this is not just some guy, this is an angel that has done this. And so Manoah said to his wife, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." But his wife said to him, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all of these things, or now announced to us such things as these." And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Mahaneh-dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. So that's another kind of a new development in the Samson story, is there's a talk of the Spirit of the Lord really being upon him, stirring him, having an influence on him. So what that does is we're reading that, is that our expectations and our hope has been raised, because we're starting to see, boy, what's going to come of this Samson? It sounds like something really big is at work here in Samson. There's this miraculous birth. There's this angel that's visited the parents. There is this vow that's going to be taken both by the mother and given back to Samson. Wow, this is going to be good. So right now, as we're reading this through chapter 13, there's got to be some sense of expectation that this is going to be a leader of, like a judge unlike any of the judges, maybe one of the best ones. Although Deborah was really one of the most lauded judges, if you really think about it, and the most true. Okay, so in chapter 14 now, we get the first hint that if we have our expectations up, we're going to already be disappointed. And it's going to be kind of a strange disappointment too, and I'll let you know why that is too. So Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. And then he came up and told his father and his mother, "I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." But his father and mother said to him, "Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives, or among all of our people, that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" But Samson said to his father, now listen to what he says, "Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes." So, for she is right in my eyes. Now, on the one hand, that means that obviously he thought that she was beautiful, but it's actually more than that. Is if that verse, that very kind of verse, it says Israel oftentimes did what was right in their eyes. So it gives you a preview that Samson is going his own way in this choice of who he's choosing for his wife, even though the mother and father have said, wait a minute, That's not really the best way. Take a wife from the people of Israel, and Samson will have none of it. And we'll see this as a constant thing throughout the story of Samson. Samson does his own thing. And it'll come to a point that we'll find something really fascinating about that in terms of God and what is actually said about that too. Okay, so if you're following along, we're in chapter 14, verse 4. Then his father and his mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. So there's a hint here now that they did not know that it was from the Lord. So Samson's going on his own way. You think about that theologically. What's going on with that? So Samson's making a decision counter to God, yet God is in the midst of this and maybe going to use that somehow. And so that's kind of tricky and interesting in how that's going to shake out. And we'll see as the story goes on where that leads. Then Samson went down with his father and his mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. Behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. And then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion to pieces as one tears a young goat. Well, I don't know about you, but I haven't tore too many young goats apart. But Samson is going even beyond that and doing this to a lion. So apparently, it can be done with a young goat to slaughter it. This is Samson taking a lion and treating it just like it was a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. So once again, that whole idea of why he's interested in her, it's right in his eyes, and that's really all that matters to Samson as far as that's concerned. And after some days he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. Behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. He scraped it out into his hand and went on, eating it as he went. And he came to his father and mother and gave them some, and they ate. But he did not tell them they had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. So what's interesting about this detail is that according to the food laws of the people of Israel, this is not good. And not only that, it's breaking his vow about food also. He is taken from an unclean animal. A lion would not be something that he could even touch like that. And honey would be another one. And so not only does he do it on his own, he gives it to his parents and has them eat it too. So this is one of the, besides the choice of the woman from the land, this is a clue that once again that he's doing his own thing. He is fully about himself and what he wants to do, no matter what the charge has been given to him to do. So his father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there, for so the young men used to do. And soon all the people saw them, and they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, "Let me now put a riddle to you. And if you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes." And they said to him, "Put your riddle that we may hear it." And he said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." Very poetic. And in 3 days they could not solve the riddle. So this Samson is quite full of himself. What's kind of a little bit funny about the riddle is that this kind of brutish Samson that just has ripped a lion apart, you can see another side to him. He's actually maybe got a brain, and he is trying to best these Philistines. So it's actually quite funny if you think about it. And so after 3 days, guess what? Yeah, they don't have a clue. about about being able to solve this riddle at all. So on the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is. So the people, her people, are kind of putting pressure on her to get to Samson so they can figure this out. Lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. So there's a nice little threat, too, that they offer her if she doesn't do what they would have her do. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? So that's an interesting question. So 30, if you think about it, 30 changes of clothing, 30 garments, that's a lot. And in that day and age especially, that's money. That's really a lot of, it's worth quite a bit. In verse 16 then, and Samson's wife wept over him and said, you only hate me. You do not love me. You have put a riddle to my people, and you have not told me what it is. And he said to her, behold, I have not told my father nor my mother, and shall I tell you? She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted, and on the seventh day he told her, because she pressed him hard. So she was really trying to get this out of him the whole time. Then she told the riddle to her people, and the men of the city said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. Okay, so yes, you heard that right. Samson just called his wife a heifer, and even in that day, that was not good. It's not just in our day. So he is playing around with them and just saying, yeah, okay, yeah, you figured it out by leaning on my wife, who he's not very happy with, obviously, and you found out my riddle. And verse 19. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 men of the town, took their spoil, and gave the garments to those who he had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Wow. Chapter 15. So the great expectation, the great hope that we maybe had for Samson the deliverer is looking kind of shady at this point. And his actions are really, once again, all about him. And it's hard to see where God is going with him. But as we read into the story, we'll see kind of the complexity then of this very complex figure, Samson. So if you're following along now, we've already gone through 13 and 14, and now we are in chapter 15. So Samson then defeats the Philistines. That's the overheading. And after some days at the time of wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife with a young goat. And he said, I will go in to my wife in the chamber. But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, I really thought that you utterly hated her. Well, I mean, after calling her a heifer, that might be part of it. Plus, just disgusted that she had given him up to the Philistines. So I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. So Samson went and caught 30 foxes and took torches, and he turned them tail to tail and put a torch between each of their tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and set fire to the stat grain and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. And then the Philistines said, who has done this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. And Samson said to them, if this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you, and after that I will quit. And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow, and he went down and stayed at the cleft of the rock of Etnan. And the Philistines came and encamped in Judah, and made a raid on Lehi. And the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" And they said, "We have come up to bind Samson, to do to him as he did to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rocks of Edom and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, so I have done to them." And they said to him, "We have come down to bind you, that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines." So he's having a little bit of a rebellion just because of the way he's carrying himself and causing a lot of problems for the people of Judah besides. Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves." And they said to him, "No, we will only bind you and give you into their hands. We will surely not kill you." So they bound him and with 2 new ropes, and they brought him up from the rock. And when he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes were on his arms became as flax as he caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and he put out his hands and took it and struck 1,000 men. And Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, the jawbone of a donkey, have I struck down 1,000 men." And as soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramoth Lehi. And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord. So this is kind of a little bit of an aberration. He actually calls upon the Lord now after all of that killing. He's thirsty. "You have granted this great salvation by the hand of your servant, and shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And God split open a hollow place that is at Lehi, and the water came out from it. And when he drank, his spirit returned. So Lord, in the face of this challenge from Samson, does provide for him. And therefore the name of that place was called En-Hakkore. It is at Lehi to this day, and he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. So there's it's kind of all comes to a head at this point, and Samson does really become a judge that has some staying power. And in fact, for 20 years, then he judges judges the people of Israel against the Philistines. Chapter 16, Samson and Delilah then. And Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute, and he went into her. The Gazites were told, "Samson has come here." And they surrounded the place and set ambush for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, "Let us wait till the light of the morning, then we might kill him." But Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he rose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 posts, and pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that is front of Hebron. After this he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came to her and said to her, "Seduce him, and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him." So it's really interesting in this sense, with this Delilah figure now, there just is, it doesn't seem like there's any kind of a lesson that's been learned by Samson about being with these Philistine women. None of them have been loyal to him. They seem to get what they want out of him, seem to use them for their people for the most part. And so he refuses to learn. He just does his thing. If he sees something, he goes after it. And that's about all that we can really say about that. "And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me what your great strength lies and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you." Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. So then the lords of the Philistines brought up 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in ambush in the inner chamber, and she said to him, "The Philistines are upon us, Samson." But he snapped the bowstrings, and a thread of the flax snapped when it touched, as a thread of a flax would snap when it touches a fire. So the secret of his strength was still not known. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound." And he said to her, "If they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." So Delilah took new ropes, bound him with them, said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And the men lying in ambush were in the inner chamber. But he snapped the ropes off like a thread. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me now how you might be bound." And he said to her, "If you weave 7 locks of my head with a web and fasten it tight in the pin, I shall become weak and like any other man." And while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into the web, and she made them tight with a pin and said to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he woke from his sleep and pulled away the pin, the loom, and the web. And she said to him, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies." And when she pressed him hard with her words, so that was the other word that was used with the other wife about being pressed hard day after day, and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart, and he said to her, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. I have taken that Nazarite vow. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called the Lord of the Philistines, saying, "Come up again, for he has told me all of his heart." And then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands, and she made him sleep on her knees. She called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head, and then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. She said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he woke up from his sleep and said, "I will go out as at the other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. And the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, brought him down to Gaza, and bound him in bronze shackles. And he ground to the mill in the prison. But the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. So I think that's kind of a funny detail in little ways. You would think that they might have thought, well, maybe if he lost his strength because we shaved his hair off his head, maybe we should keep it cut. Well, a little detail they apparently didn't think of. So now the next overheading is the death of Samson. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, "Our God has given Samson, our enemy, over into our hand." And when the people saw him, they praised their God. And they said, "Our God has given our enemy into our hand, the ravager of our country, who has killed many of us." And when their hearts were merry, they said, "Call Samson that he may entertain us." So it's kind of this situation now. They want to throw a party and basically mock the person that they have finally been able to subdue and capture, and mock him because of all the casualties that he's inflicted upon the Philistines. They've got the lion by the tail now, so to speak. And so they called Samson out of the prison, and he entertained them. They made him stand between the pillars, and Samson said to the young man who held him by his hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women, and the lords of the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson entertained. Samson called to the Lord. Now, I mean, that's significant. So not too many times has Samson called to the Lord. The one was just kind of to give him something to drink after he had been famished by slaughtering a bunch of Philistines. But he once again, and rarely now, but again, does call to the Lord. O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me only this once. O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, and his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And then he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people who were in it. And so the dead whom he killed on his death were more than those whom he had killed during his entire life. So kind of a little bit of an irony there, in that the Philistines were mocking him because of the people that he had killed, the Philistines that he's killed. And now this latest and last adventure of Samson actually kills more than he had killed his entire life, in his entire lifetime. Then his brothers and all his family came down and took him and brought him and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father, for he had judged Israel for those 20 years. So quite a story going through all of that about the Samson story. And so we see what a kind of a complex figure Samson is. The truth is, he did rule as a judge for over 20 years. So there was a time of freedom from the Philistines. Yet if you kind of look at it, it's kind of hard to give him a good grade, so to speak, especially when it seemed like the story of Samson started out with all this stuff that gave us a lot of hope that this might be a leader that is going to be a leader that's going to have maybe a lasting effect upon the people of Israel, not just be a leader that when they die, they will, just go back to their ways, but a leader that maybe because of his closeness to the Lord, especially by how the Lord, with that miraculous birth and all that other stuff, seems to be setting this up. But no, not really. In fact, it seems like in terms of the judges, I would say that in terms of his faithfulness and other things and his obedience to the Lord, it was pretty minimal. Yet God's purposes against the Philistines were still accomplished. So that is kind of remarkable in itself. There was a story of I think a kind of a little novel by a novelist, and a short story is called Graham Greene, and it was called The Whiskey Priest. And it was a story of kind of in the desert Southwest in, I don't know, the time either before the Civil War, about a priest, kind of a drunken priest that is kind of reminds me a little bit of Samson. He feels he has a call from God, but he just can't get over himself, so to speak, and kind of bumbles from one thing to the next, drifting in here and there. But despite that, it's kind of interesting. The novel kind of draws out some things that he did that touched people. And so I think one of the things that when we think about maybe the story of Samson, there was a deliverance, and it was from God, even if it came at the hand of a very iffy human. And I don't wonder, but we know that, maybe in terms of the way God acts in the world, this is one of the ways that he accomplishes his purposes. None of us are perfect. None of us always go the right way, in obedience especially. And it seems like one of the biggest problems that Samson had was strictly obedience and just wanting to do things his way because he wanted to. Maybe not unlike us at times. So as we maybe look at Samson and give him a fairly bad grade as far as the judges in terms of other judges, we're kind of reminded of that and reminded of God's purposes being done in the world despite human frailty, despite human sin. So that's one of the lessons that I draw from the story of Samson. And maybe it's the story of us sometimes too, and the story of even leaders within the Christian church. Not that it makes it okay when they are rebellious and when they are obstinate and when they go their own way, and that causes damage. But sometimes, despite that, the work of God is at some level accomplished in spite of that. So that's kind of one of the things that I was just left with the whole story of Samson. You might have some of your own observations about Samson, his personality, his weakness, especially for the women, and even being called out on that a number of different occasions by his parents. I thought the relationship with his parents was interesting throughout the narrative too, and just seemed like he pretty much poo-pooed almost anything that they had to say or tried to intervene with him too. So that brought us kind of 4 chapters tonight. We covered a lot of ground, covered the whole Samson narrative. I was really kind of interested to get to that. I remember it once again from my 3rd or 4th grade teacher back in Sunday school, and it's kind of neat to read it with you. I mean, I've read it other times, but it's an interesting story, so I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next week. Next time we're going to be going into some other judges now, some other parts of the history then after Samson. We'll see where that takes us with the judges. So thank you. Let's say a word of prayer. Gracious God, thank you for today. Thank you for this story of Samson, a story kind of a complicated guy, a complicated leader of Israel. And sometimes we can see that in our own lives and in our own leaders. And we just ask for your guidance. We ask for you to lead us by your power of your Holy Spirit as churches, whatever churches we're in, that we can complete the mission that you have for us, that we can fulfill that, and that your guidance will always be there. Help us to not go our own way, but to look for you for leading. And let's pray the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thanks for being with me. Have a great night, everybody, and a great rest of the week. And you take care. We'll see you again next week.